Okay, yesterday we talked a little bit about some of the events that helped Jews go from being citizens to being outcasts, and we're going to kind of continue on with that a little bit. We'll talk about the Nuremberg laws a little bit more in depth in this lesson. We're basically looking at number 67 today. This is themes of the Nuremberg laws. This will actually be a short answer question on your review sheet. Or sorry, on your next test, and I've kind of outlined this on your review sheet, so it should be pretty easy for you. The Nuremberg laws were a series of laws that were passed at the Nuremberg rallies that we'll talk about. And shortly after the Nuremberg laws, there were a lot of other laws that were passed, the anti-Jewish laws that discriminate against the Jewish people. So when you look at this graph here, or this grid, you can see some of the rights that were taken away from Jews. We'll actually do another activity today where we'll look some more at some of these rights. But think for just a second here, what rights are most important to you? Which ones would bother you the most if this right was taken from you? I'm guessing being able to leave your home whenever you choose would be a big one. Maybe for some of you, being able to date or marry whoever you choose is a big one. Shopping might be important to some of you. I know a lot of you like pets. Not being able to own a pet might affect some of you. And you may not feel it right now, but not being able to go to school might be important to you as well. When you think about people during the Holocaust, some of these were young kids, and then they completely missed their high school years. And when the Holocaust is over, if they manage to survive, they enter this world where they've lost that education. Many of them end up living in places where they don't speak the language. And so it's very, very difficult for these people. The Nuremberg laws were a series of laws. They were passed at a Nuremberg rally that we've talked about, that they were passed on September 15th of 1935. I won't ask you about the date of this or anything, but we've mentioned all three of these laws. The Nuremberg laws was a series of 3 laws, and we've talked about all 3 of these before. One being the law for the protection of German blood and German honor. Basically, it regards marriage and who you can marry and who you can't marry. The Reich citizenship law that we talked about yesterday designated Jews as subjects and said they were no longer citizens. And then those laws were followed by the third law, which was the law for the protection of the genetic health of German people. This law actually required a medical examination before you could get married, and you had to get a certificate. And this is a picture that we have seen before. As I said, after the Nuremberg laws of 35, there were lots of supplemental decrees that were issued to basically completely take Jews out of society, deprive them of their rights as human beings. And we'll look at some of those rights later today. One of your essay questions on the test is going to be to talk about the Nuremberg laws and describe some of the themes. And so you'll see these themes on your review sheet, but this is to help you with that. One of the first themes of the Nuremberg laws you'd want to talk about is they help to define who is Jewish. As we said, you can't tell who is Jewish just by looking at them. Their definition of who was a Jew was someone with 3 Jewish grandparents. And then within that, they had mishlings that we've talked about. If you had 2 Jewish grandparents, but you didn't practice Judaism or have a Jewish spouse, you would be a first-class mishling. If you only had 1 Jewish grandparent, you would be a second-class mishling. And so all of these laws kind of varied depending on what degree of Jewishness you were determined to be. This is a poster that was created during this time period. These posters could be put up in lots of different places very easily, kind of explaining who was allowed to marry and who was not allowed to marry, who is considered Jewish by these new laws. So again, that theme 1 is, defining who is Jew. There were 7 documents that were required in order to prove that you were of German descent. You had to put forth or be able to produce your birth or baptismal certificates, your certificate for both your parents, and certificates for all 4 grandparents. Now, if you think back in those days, getting those certificates was going to be very difficult, especially when people were born at home. My grandmother, both my grandparents were born at home and did not have birth certificates. My father was actually born at home. He did have a birth certificate, but there was some discrepancy between when his mother said he was born and when the birth certificate said he was born. So you can imagine, getting documents back in those days could be very, very difficult. The second theme of these Nuremberg laws was to strip Jews of their full citizenship. We saw that with the Reich citizenship law. Theme 3 was to maintain racial purity. As you notice with the marriage laws, that there was no intermarriage between Jews and non-Jews. We've already talked about this, not hiring a female under the age of 45 in your home if you were German. Again, it was legal. You could not hire someone, again, trying to prevent that racial mixing. Theme number 4 is they did everything they could to deprive Jews of income. They could no longer be lawyers. They could no longer be teachers. They took away what jobs they could have. And not only with taking away their jobs and depriving them of income, theme number 3 is they deprived them of their property. They had to register all their assets, all their gold, all their valuables had to be registered with the state. Many times they were forced to sell this property. We talked yesterday about Billy Joel's grandfather and the Aryanization of property and how businesses and homes were taken away from Jewish people. Theme number 6 was excluding them from educational opportunities. Again, Jews could not be teachers, but also Jews were not allowed to attend school anymore. So many of them lost a lot of education. We'll talk when we talk about ghettos and camps, and there was a strong urgency among the Jews to try and maintain that education. And theme 7 of the Nuremberg laws was branding. Again, you can't tell who is Jewish, so we have to make sure that we know. One of the things that was required by law, if you were Jewish, you were required to change your middle name. If you were female, your middle name was now Sarah. And if you were male, your middle name was Israel. And this was by law, so they could tell who was Jewish and who was not. They also forced them to carry identity papers, and these papers are stamped with a J for Juden or Jew, and they would have to present these papers if asked to do so. We'll see that in a video that we'll watch next week. And then, as we talked about, they had to wear the yellow star. They had to pay for the material. They had to create these. They had to sew it on the front and the back of all of their garments. I've seen some places where it said anyone over the age of 6. Other places I've seen over 7, so I can't tell you for exactly sure what the age was that this was required of the Jews. And again, all of this had to be done legally, and it couldn't be done by custom. They wanted to legally wipe out the Jews, and Jews were very law-abiding citizens, and if they made them laws, it also made it have it more enforceable for people as well. The other thing that you're going to do today, and I'll go ahead and explain it just a little bit here, you'll find the lesson in Canvas, but I have actually listed on a timeline all these other laws that took place against the Jews, and very incremental. All of a sudden this week you can't own a radio, now you can't have a pet, but I want you to look at these laws and then answer a couple questions about them, and you will see that in Canvas also. It should be also in your to-do list. So thanks a lot for listening, and hope to see you soon.